Number one is the Department of Corrections salaries are incredibly low. No question about that. The man that I work for, who's been the senior chaplain at Ridgeland Correctional Institution up here on exit 22 on I-95, Phil Wren, he has been the chaplain there for the 20 years that prison has been in existence. To become a chaplain, you've got to have a master's degree, you've got to have ordination from a recognized denomination, you've got to have counseling experience, you're working under very difficult circumstances. He's been a chaplain for 22 years, head chaplain there for 20 years. His salary, a couple months ago, finally, for the first time, got over $40,000. The head warden of Leeper, the former head warden at Leeper, which is a maximum security prison, and that had death row all the years that he was the warden, is on my board, a man named Stan Burt, a wonderful man. He had the very top salary you can get as a warden, $80,000 a year. That's not the kind of an income that's going to attract the best and the brightest. Secondly, the organization is big. There are about 20,000 state inmates at any one time. And there's a staff of about 6,000. That's a big organization. It's a big organization. And we went and met with Senator Shane Martin, who is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Penology and Corrections, up in his office in Columbia a couple of months ago. And Senator Martin was focusing in on Stan Burt. Stan Burt said our directors ought to be people who are knowledgeable about corrections. Instead, they're political appointees. Senator Martin finally looked at it and he said, well, let me ask you a question. Why are you so concerned about that? There's other good people in the department. So Stan looked at me and he says, Chuck, you were the captain of a nuclear submarine, right? Yeah. Would they have taken a politician and put him in charge of your nuclear submarine? Then he looked at Senator Martin. He said, Senator Martin, would you put a politician in charge of a hospital? Senator Martin looked at me and he says, I get your point. Our present director is a guy named Brian Sterling. Brian Sterling worked for a couple of small law firms. He's a very honorable man. He's a good man in many ways. But after working for a couple of law firms, he then became Governor Haley's chief of staff. And when the vacancy occurred as the director, she put him in charge. And he's been in charge now for 5 years. He doesn't have any experience at all in corrections department. He's never had any experience in running a large organization. And yet, we put him in there. It's not his fault, but he doesn't know how to do it. The inmates. You all know, I think, that last April, we had the most deadly prison riot in South Carolina that has occurred anywhere in the country in the last 25 years at Lee County Correctional Institution. There were 7 inmates killed by other inmates. It took about 7 or 8 hours to get the riot under control. There was major amounts of damage that were done to the buildings, and of course, 7 fatalities. There were also about 12 or 13 serious injuries. A year before that, almost exactly a year, there was a case where 2 mental patients had been assigned to the same cell. And that happens because, as doctors know, under HIPAA laws, we can't be told who is under mental health treatment. And so they're put out there, and the correctional officers and people who were required to assign them to different cells did not know that these two people were mental patients. They called one inmate after another into their cell one morning and strangled four. Incredible. Incredible. And the inmates do not have any real support from the organization for getting rehabilitated. They don't have any incentive whatsoever to get them out into the community, to go to chapel services, or to go to classes or whatever. The whole state has been locked down. All of medium security and maximum security prisons have been locked down since the riot at Lee County in April. They have had no classes. They've had no opportunities to get out of their dorms. They've not been allowed to come to chapel services. And oh, by the way, that's going to continue throughout the Christmas holiday. So for 7-8 months, they haven't been able to come to chapel. The inmates lose hope. I have talked to inmates over and over and over again who come back to prison after being released, and they tell me stories that just cause me to shudder. In many cases, people don't want to rent them an apartment. They're coming out of prison. Employers don't want to hire them. They're coming out of prison. They can't get transportation. And let me tell you what the state does when they release an inmate. The inmate may have been in there for years. When they get out, volunteers bring in a set of clothes for them. The state doesn't even provide that. They get one set of clothes that are provided by volunteers. And then they're given a bus ticket to any Greyhound station they want to go to in Georgia, North Carolina, or South Carolina. And they are given $10. And they are given 3 days of medicine, unless they're on mental health medication, in which case they get 5 days. Now, what are they supposed to do when the medicine runs out? What are they supposed to do for food when they get out up in Spartanburg in December or January? We have nothing to help. There are no halfway houses that the state has. All the halfway houses that we have in the state are there because of volunteers, organizations. And yet, in our communities, including this one right here, trying to get a halfway house built is almost impossible. I'm sure Paul can explain that. People don't want them. They don't want them. So we turn our backs on these people. And we make it almost impossible for them to stay out of prison. And oh, by the way, all of the statistics show that across the country, about 2/3 of all inmates are back in prison within 5 years. Is this of importance to us? Yeah. It is, on so many ways. If they come back into our communities and they are angrier and more violent than they were when they went into prison, is our community being served? I don't think so. I don't think so. So what are we trying to do? Well, some of us have gotten together and decided that as much as we felt we were doing some good, we couldn't even begin to address the fundamental problems unless we were free of being employees of the department. So we've left, and we've now got this organization being formed. A couple other really quick things I wanted to say. These inmates, a lot of them tell us that they've never seen real love in all their lives, except what they see from volunteers in chapels. This is one that was made for me by one of the inmates at my prison. He said he had never seen love before in action until he got in touch with us. And he made this for me, and it took him, obviously, a lot of time, a lot of effort. I believe that most of the people that I have met want to change. Most of the inmates genuinely want to change. There are some important, some that will never change, but there's a lot of them that will. And all they need is help and encouragement and hope and some understanding of what they're going through to try to get them back on the right path. A question for all of you Christians. In the Bible, there are 3 murderers who did great and wonderful things after they repented and served the Lord in powerful ways. Who were they? Paul was one. David committed adultery with Bathsheba next door. And when she got pregnant, he had her husband killed. Moses. And Moses. Moses killed an Egyptian man and had to flee the country for 40 years before God called him back to go get his people out of there.